Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Indigenous and Northern Affairs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and it's a pleasure for me to rise and speak today. I've listened very attentively to colleagues in the House as they have spoken, and I certainly want to thank my colleague from St. John Rossi, who's sharing his time with me today, and for his speech. He's one of our colleagues that has continued to champion many issues, but certainly the issues around poverty, of which he speaks very passionately about. But, Mr. Speaker, I also listened attentively to members on the other side. And let me say, I was somewhat disappointed by my colleague from the NDP, the member for Rimouski, and I apologize for not having the full title of his riding in front of me at this time. But, you know, the condescending way in which he spoke, I found somewhat offensive, simply because to make any indication that members on the government side would not be attentive to bills and legislation and be fully informed of what we are debating in this House is offensive to all of us as honourable members. But I was very proud of my colleague from Winnipeg Centre, who's offered to have that debate and to do so in Winnipeg. And I hope that will happen, because I think it's important to have the facts in the public and real information that people can understand. But, Mr. Speaker, I want to speak to a few of the things that have been raised here today. And first of all, we talk about transparency, we talk about accountability. It is our government that has led the way on transparency. In fact, we led the way on transparency when we were the third party in the House of Commons. We were some of the first MPs in the House of Commons to make transparent a lot of the financial investments that we were spending within our ridings. And, Mr. Speaker, the NDP were one of the groups that did not want to make transparent many of their finances at that particular time. So members need to be reminded of who started the trends around transparency and who continues to build on and lead on transparency and on reform, change, and accountability in the House of Commons. Mr. Speaker, not only that, we are leading on change and we're leading on reform in terms of how we deal with Canadians. And I think that has been very obvious. Our government has been a government who listens to Canadians, who understands Canadians, and is working hard to meet the goals and objectives that they have laid out for us. And, Mr. Speaker, one of the things that I can say for certain in this budget is that we have responded to great needs in this country, needs that have been left behind for a very, very long time. And when I hear the former government members talk, Mr. Speaker, I'm only reminded of how history continues to try and rewrite itself. Well, the facts also speak for themselves, Mr. Speaker. And we live in a country where under the former government, many people were left behind. And a lot of those people left behind were the very people that sent me here to represent them. And that's what I'm going to do. And I'm very proud of the budget that we have laid out for Canadians, because it not only responds to those that are the loudest or those that may be the most affluent, it responds to the needs of all Canadians, even those that have been left behind and left in poverty. It responds to the needs of First Canadians, our Indigenous people. And I can read off the list here for you, a whole list of stats with regard to Inuit people, of which I am a descendant, who talk about 39% of them living in crowded homes. We had a budget this year for the first time that invested in housing for Inuit people. And if I would say to the members opposite, you may want to stand in this place and vote against that, but I certainly will not be standing in this place and voting against it, not with those statistics. Compare that with 4% of Canadians who live in crowded housing, quite substantially different. However, we don't want to have anyone in this country living in unsubstantial situations, and that's why we're investing in all aspects. Let's look at the fact, Mr. Speaker, that 45% of the unemployment, there's a 45% unemployment rate for Inuit people in the country. as opposed, Mr. Speaker, to other sectors. That didn't get created in the last 7 months, I want to remind honourable members. Those are gaps that have been left there because former governments and members did not address those gaps. So these are investments that we have made, putting more money into the assets program, ensuring that there are better targets for employment of people that are left behind. So, Mr. Speaker, again, I will continue to say that we are living up to our commitment, and yes, we are. And we are living up to the commitment and the promises that we have made Canadians. We have a full mandate to fulfill those promises and commitments, and I can tell you that this government will do so over the course of that time. In the last 7 months, I have seen a transformation in this country that I have not seen in the last 10 years. I have seen a government who have responded to the very basic needs for infrastructure across communities in this country. Who in this House of Commons wants to vote against that? I have seen them make, Mr. Speaker, historic investments in Indigenous communities. I challenge people to stand and vote against that. I have seen this government invest more in student jobs, millions more in student jobs. Even in my own riding this year, Mr. Speaker, I am seeing record numbers of summer jobs, more than I have ever had. I am seeing more investments in summer jobs going to both Indigenous and non-Indigenous communities. So when I look at this budget, Mr. Speaker, I'm not only seeing the targets to the middle class and how we're helping rise people up and helping people rise up out of poverty. I'm seeing new investments for the first time in our country in housing for northern regions and Inuit people. I'm seeing infrastructure investments in highways and transits and schools that we have not had for a long time. So people cannot forget that we are not going to fix in 7 months what has been created in decades. But we are making the greatest attempt to do so and to honor our commitment to the people of this country. And I can tell you that when I stand to vote on this budget, I will be standing to vote very proudly, because for the first time in the many years that I have been lobbying, fighting, representing, and challenging governments to do more for people in rural and northern Canada, I'm finally seeing some real action. But even more so than that, Mr. Speaker, I'm seeing action for all my colleagues as well, who come here, Mr. Speaker, to lobby hard for the people who sent them, who talks about the growing numbers in the cities across our country and the need for new transit and infrastructure and co-op housing and other housing programs. And I must say, I am very happy to see the investments that are going in those directions. The Child Benefit Program, the feedback I have been getting from people in our province in Newfoundland and Labrador has been amazing. They like the new Child Benefit Program. It is putting more money into their families and into their pockets. Despite what everyone on the other side may be saying or thinking, you can just read down through the comments that I get and I'm amazed. I have gained this amount of money. My family has gained this amount of money. And I think those are the real facts and where you're seeing the real transitions that are being made. So, Mr. Speaker, many people would love to rewrite history. They would love to rewrite the fact that they did not support investments. The NDP and the Conservatives campaign on balancing the budget. And my challenge today to them, Mr. Speaker, would be which of those investments would you cut? Which ones would you cut? Would you stop trying to help children out of poverty in this country? Would you cut record and historic funding to Indigenous people in the country? Would you not address the problems with transit and overcrowding in our cities? I would challenge the members to tell me today which pieces of this budget in infrastructure and spending in social and economic development that they would not support, because if Canadians had voted in their direction, they would not be seeing this change. They would not see the investments that are getting in their communities. And again, Mr. Speaker, when you continue to do the same thing, you get the same result. Well, we're doing things differently, and we're getting a better result. Thank you very much.
Questions and comments? Let's say, come